Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Welcome to Rock Solid Families podcast. This is Merrill Hutchinson being joined by my favorite wife, Linda.
Favorite wife? How many wives do you have?
Just one. That's what qualifies you as my favorite.
Okay, so...
Oh, you were getting all full of yourself like you were the favorite of the whole gang,
well,
huh?
I was just kind of wondering.
You still are my favorite.
How many you have.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do about your kids? Because you have 5 children, 5 grandchildren. So how do you do that?
Well, I like to have fun with that. I always like Mackenzie's, she's my favorite daughter.
She's your only daughter.
Because she's our only daughter. And then,
okay, you have 4 boys. So what do you do about that?
Well, I have to use a qualifier. Like, Nick, you're my favorite oldest son.
Well, you got to qualify which Nick, because we have 2 Nicks.
I just said, Nick, you're my favorite oldest son. Because the other Nick is my favorite youngest son.
You know, people who are just now tuning into Rock Solid Families podcast are probably wondering, 2 Nicks,
Not very creative, guys. We don't, we like a name, we stick with it.
I've heard George Foreman he has 5 boys and 5 girls, and he named all 5 boys by the name of George. George 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I didn't know it was 5 or not, but I know he named all his boys. So he calls them by, I think, number, like,
they also have nicknames, I'm sure. Interesting nicknames. But he said he did that because he wanted to create this unity, this bond, this manhood, right? And so, we could maybe do that. But
so what's that mean he did for his girls?
Actually, they don't have the same name, which is kind of weird.
So where's their unity? Where's their bond?
I don't know. But each child, each one of our 5 children, our 5 grandchildren, your only wife, each one of us are unique, right? And so how we parent, how we parent, how we respond, how we relate to each one of our children are different. But we want to help you today with some common principles that we have found to be really helpful when we're launching our teenager or older teenager or young adult child.
Well, let's talk a little bit about why we're doing this show. As we record this, we're coming into the spring of the year, and we start to get a lot of the conversations about graduation and next plans and schools, colleges, what are we going to do after? And inevitably, you will get some conversations about, I can't believe they're this old.
Yeah.
I can't believe they're going to be moving out. And a lot of times you act like that just happened. Like all of a sudden they just turned from the womb to 18, like it just happened in 30 seconds. But you've had a lifetime to actually go through that, at least their lifetime. And so we really want to talk about the issues of that. And I think it really, maybe not across the board universally, but that has changed in today's generations versus like, I mean, I've said this before on our show, like we had a phrase around our house and none of us kids were offended by it. But
I'm afraid to answer.
My dad would say, when you're 18, don't let the door hit you in the butt.
Okay, I'm glad you said butt.
Yeah.
I don't think he said that.
No, he didn't say butt. I used the
Good,
G version. Yeah. And again, he would always have a kind of a little smirk on his face when he would say that. But that was kind of a general thought process by, I can't say all, but definitely many. Like all of my friends had every intention of moving out. That was just part of,
I couldn't wait.
You go to school, you graduate high school, you're either going to college or you're getting a job. It doesn't mean you didn't stick around maybe for a little bit, while you're in school, but you definitely had the idea that your days were numbered.
Were you afraid of adulthood?
No. No, I wasn't afraid of adulthood at all. I mean, in fact, you and I have joked before. I think God does something to older teens and young adults.
Oh, goodness.
Because, our 2 older sons.
We're 32 and 29 now.
Yeah, they were like great kids. But in those 17, 18, 19 years of age,
Yeah.
something changes.
They wanted to be out on their own.
And that's exactly what it is. They're
Yeah.
wanting to spread their wings. They're wanting to do their things. And now you're having like two captains on the team, two chiefs in the firehouse. You know, you're having lots of these things, and you're going, okay,
Yeah.
No, it's time for you to leave now.
Yeah. But, you know, as this world gets darker and darker, I know that there are a lot of parents out there who are very nervous about their child going out into the world, and that they think it's very scary for them, and it's scary for the parent. And so if that's you, I really encourage you to go back to a couple weeks ago that we did a whole show on, are you an insecure parent? And so we really addressed these insecurities and these fears we have as parents and how we sometimes can project them onto our kids. We're really not going to focus so much on that today. But we do believe that if that's you, we have some solutions for that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So get yourself a little piece of paper and a pen if you feel the need to take some notes or jot down a few pointers here and there. Let's thank our sponsors, and then we'll get rolling.
Yeah.
So Rock Solid Families Podcast would like to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction for coming alongside of the Rock Solid Family Group. See, now we're a group. We've got a ministry, and so we just want to thank those guys. They believe in what we do. They believe in our messaging, and there's really supportive. So we are greatly appreciative of the help that they give us. So,
I think it's,
go ahead.
I think it's funny that you're very consciously saying Rock Solid Families Podcast, even though our sign still says Rock Solid Radio.
We're waiting for that. We're waiting.
Yes, we have transitioned our podcast name to really drop the radio, which is what we were on originally 5 years ago, but to just call it the Rock Solid Families Podcast. So we both are very intentional, because for 5 years we've been saying Rock Solid Radio.
That's
so
right.
if you're kind of wondering if it's the same thing, it is. It's the same background. It just, again, we need a different sign. But we know that families are important, and we want to really reach.
We wanted to put
families.
that in our name. So also, just to go back, so we're going to be talking today about some of the insecurities that are going into this launching of our kids. And so we talked about that a couple weeks ago in our show about insecurity. And so you gotta kind of remember that some of the concerns you have about your kids launching out and leaving your home are baked into some insecurities that you have. And so that's not to get defensive about or anything like that. That's a matter of going, okay, why am I concerned about that or afraid to the point where I could possibly hinder or handicap them?
Yeah.
Because we talked, you shared the story about a lady that we know that like almost forbid her child to go into the military.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about here. And she was so fearful of losing him. And that's a legit fear. Right? I mean, I don't want to sit there and dismiss that.
We have two Navy boys' sons. So we understand that.
Yeah. And so there's an insecurity baked into this. And rather than just give you like, don't do that or do this. Well, you better first understand where all your energy comes in that you're putting into these ways that you're trying to raise up your kids.
So last fall, we did a whole parenting series on our podcast called The Seasons of Parenting. And it was season 1 or episode 198, where we specifically talked about this last season 4 of parenting, which is the emancipation, where we really transition our children into adulthood and we change our relationship from the parent authority in the mentoring to a friendship, right? And so season 1 was the service, where our children are 2 and under and they need our help for their needs. And then ages 3 through 12 was that discipline, authority stage, where you're leading them and showing them by your example and by your words and rules. And then we transitioned into the teenage years. We call it season 3, where it's really the mentoring, where we're starting to let go. And we're going to be talking a lot about season 3 and season 4 today, because they really do come together on what we need to do as parents on helping our kids launch into adulthood.
Yeah. So let's get started as we talk about how we can help mom and dad out there to get more strongly equipped to help not just yourself, but you're really, the goal here is to really be helping your kids so that they can not be filled with your insecurities. They're going to have enough of their own insecurities. We want to give them the tools to work through that by not putting our insecurities on them as well.
We specifically picked this time, the beginning of May, because we know this is when college graduations and high school graduations and kids coming back from college to live back at home during the summer. And, kids are getting jobs for the first time, learning to drive. And so sometimes that transition into those freedoms and responsibilities don't go so smoothly. And so we want to just help you. We think there's some tips that if we can kind of put into place early and be consistent with, you're going to see success in your parenting and in your relationship with your teen and young adult child.
All right. So here we go. 6 keys to helping your child launch successfully. And so number 1 is kind of related to a little bit of what we were just talking about earlier. You start early in this process of launching. You start early. If you are in season 3, so you're in these early teenage years, you are well into doing this. Actually, you can even be starting earlier than that because you're teaching some responsibility and things like that, even when they're just young kids doing their chores and stuff like that. But by the time they're getting in, that's why in our high schools today, hon, they have graduation plans or the plan to get out in your 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade year. In many of our schools, it's mandatory that they get a 4-year plan or a way out so that we don't all of a sudden show up at our senior year doorstep and go, what
do I do now?
But us as parents, we do that sort of thing all the time. Like, how did we get here? So we start this early. All right. And those of you who are onto that, what does that mean? Well, that means you start the discussions, okay? I want to be careful here because this is a question that juniors and seniors in high school become so sick and tired of.
What are you going to do?
What are you doing when you graduate? Okay, because that's their personal decision in terms of their gifts and talents and their interests. But our question is, what are you doing when your kid graduates? What are you doing to get your kid to graduate? And so that's more of a process and a plan versus what they want to do for their dream job.
Preparing them for when they graduate. I have so many clients who are the parents of these adult children, and they're coming in, the parent is coming in all balled up with anxiety or anger about their adult child who's not launching. And we really have to kind of break down, like, where did we fall off the track, right? And a lot of it has to do that we didn't have these early conversations about you're not just going to sit on the couch or lay in the bed in your room after you graduate with no job and with no plan. That's not going to be okay in our home. And you can't just surprise that to them on graduation day.
Yeah. So that goes into our second deal. Our number 2 is the idea of you and your spouse coming together and saying, okay, let's do this well, but let's start to set some of the boundaries up that these are boundaries and expectations that we need to see from our parenting aspect, but our kid needs to experience so that they can start to prepare. And so these are simple things, kind of like you said, hon, like at a very early age where you are making comments like, hey, when you are graduated from high school or whatever, you're not sitting in the basement playing video games. You'll have a job, you'll have a responsibility. You'll either be pursuing an education or a job or something. And so you are stating how you will operate. My parents made it very clear that at graduation, if you had a job and you weren't going to school or anything, you were going to pay rent to live in their house. And so that was your graduation present. We weren't told that at graduation.
No.
It wasn't like, okay, guess what? We were told that, like, I knew that when I was, I don't know, freshman, sophomore, my older sister, they were talking that. And pretty much by the time, that senior year was coming around, we knew, okay, well, you're going to be paying this much money every month to live here, and you're welcome to stay here, but this is what you'll pay.
And, again, communicate those clear boundaries, those healthy boundaries clearly and respectfully. Don't surprise them. Don't threaten them. please help them understand we're not trying to punish you. We're trying to prepare you, and we want to see you succeed. So that's why when you're 16, you will have a little part-time job and start paying for your gas money or your phone bill. You're going to start doing that at 16 so that when they're 18 and out of high school, they're already starting, they have a checking account. Our 17-year-old daughter has a debit card, and she pays for her things that she wants. And we don't go out and buy her special, ice cream or special cream
fingernail
polish or whatever. I mean, obviously her basic needs are met here, but she knows if there's something extravagant or extra that she wants, she's going to have to earn money to pay for them.
Let me just go back for just a second, because there are probably some parents that are listening to this, and maybe they already have a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old, and they're kind of seeing, we're starting to get into this gray area of uncertainty. When you're done listening to this show, this is not the time that you hang up the show part and go in and say, guess what? Right? Because you didn't do your job as a parent as well as maybe you could have. Again, we're not trying to divide and break the family here. We're trying to usher the maturing along for our kids. And so you might want to approach it more with the idea of, okay, listen, you've been hanging out in the basement. You're not very aggressive at getting a job or figuring out what you're going to do next. And I understand that's a lot of decision making and all of that, but we're going to give you 6 months. We're going to give you 4 months. We're going to, in other words, you're going to give a reasonable time where you say, by this time, here are some things that we are expecting and need to see from you.
Yeah.
And then if you don't see that, then you have to be willing to enforce it. So if it's like, if you're going to stay here, then in 4 months, you're going to start paying rent, and this is what your rent will be. And again, this is not a threat. Like if you don't straighten up, you're going to start paying. No, it's not a threat at all. It's
calmly,
because
respectfully.
it's a matter of laying it out. You're not shocking them. They have time to process it, and then they can figure it out. They can go, well, you know what? It's a whole lot cheaper to be here, so I think I'll stay here and I'll pay the rent. Or, you know what? I don't need this.
We're not expecting you to kick your kids out to the curb. There's two important things here in step 2 when we're communicating boundaries clearly and respectfully. And one is that, as you said, if they're 20 and you haven't even started this conversation, I want you to lead with an apology. And I want you to say, hey, I'm sorry that I didn't have this conversation with you years ago. That was our fault. This was my bad. And if you're divorced, this is my second part. If you're divorced and you're trying to blend families or co-parent, there is this game that's played oftentimes, this power play of, well, they don't have to have a job in my house. They don't have to pay rent at my house. And so all of a sudden you turn out to be the bad guy, right? And so it's really important that you and your ex, as much as possible, get on the same page for the benefit of your child, not as a power play and not as a revenge tool, to try to help your child launch and succeed. Maybe even share the show with them. So it's not you trying to manipulate or trying to power up, but you're trying to say, we've got to make some changes for the benefit of our child, because they're playing us.
Right.
And they're manipulating the situation.
And not out of evilness on their part. They're doing it because it's easier, it's self-serving. And so it's a comfortable place to hang out. So you're not going to go beating them up for that, because you actually provided that
the soft landing.
That place for them. All right. So let's go to number 3.
Yes.
Okay. And so number 3 is this idea of explaining the upcoming changes beforehand. And so, and this is really a great point with not waiting even to the senior year and those kind of things. This is like when your kids are 7 and 8 years old, and you say, hey, guys, I know you're young and I know you only get a little bit of an allowance, but we're going to start a savings account.
Yeah.
And in your savings account from now on, we expect that you start putting, X number of dollars or some percentage or whatever of some birthday money or some allowance, whatever your system is, that you start doing this. Okay. And then, maybe you're going to fast forward a little bit in your years, and you're going to be like, okay, listen, you're 14. and you're going to possibly be able to drive when you're 16. So here's how we're going to approach
Love
the
it.
driving.
Yep.
And the driving is going to be, hey, we pay half the car, you pay half the car. And again, like you're setting them up so that they can see the path versus constantly on their heels wondering why things aren't going the way they want in the heat of that moment.
Yes, we had to do that. Our three youngest children came in our home through adoption 7-8 years ago. And so when they came in, they were 11, 10, and 7. So we had to help them understand you're not going to get a phone until you're 13. Okay, I know you really want one and you think that's what equates love, but we believe love is waiting until it's the right time and healthiest for you. So 13 is when we'll start talking about it. You're going to date not until you're 16. And yeah, you might like a guy or a girl and want to go with them, but you're not going to go out on a date until you're 16. We did that. We explained those changes way before. That's a perfect example, hon, of what was going to happen. So there were no surprises. And that way they're prepared for that independence and those freedoms and responsibilities.
Can I tell you that even though you do this and you might think, good, I got a great plan, it doesn't mean they're always going to accept it and like it, because this is part of why we do what we do at Rock Solid Families and on this podcast. The world is sending them a very different message.
Yes.
They're going to school in 4th and 5th grade and the other kids are getting phones, and they're wondering, even though they've heard you preach about your rule when not till they're 13, they're not necessarily liking your rule. And so what I'm saying is it takes a lot of the emotion out when they know what to expect. It doesn't mean they necessarily are going to like it, but this is where you have to be solid. And this is why you also need to understand, this is where your wisdom comes in of being able to say, well, I know because I've been there before, I know where this leads and the greater likelihood of success. And that's where you have to kick in versus, well, all the other kids have phones and I'm the only one who doesn't. Well, you know, this is where you have to come in and not explain yourself away as if you're right or wrong, but say, no, this is how I see it. This is what we're going to do.
Perfect example, hon, because, you know, we talked about the car matching when the kids were young and they were saving their money. And this was their car fund, right? They're not going to pull it out for everything they want. This is going to be for the car. And so, yeah, our kids, when they turned 16, had friends that got brand new sports cars or shiny trucks when they turned 16, and they didn't have to pay a dime. But that's not the way it was in our home. And so, yeah, they didn't like that for sure. But we explained it ahead of time why we were doing that. And we felt like that was the best way for them to be responsible. And we let them know we're only going to do that once. So if you crash your car, then you're on your own for number 2. And so they knew that way ahead of time.
And we've had that happen.
And we've had that happen. Our daughter's on car number 3.
And again, you help them through those situations. Okay, it's not like you just laugh at that, and because that's not funny. Those are bad situations.
By the way, our daughter did not crash cars, but we got some lemons, right? And
well, she did. Yeah, she had her issues.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, though, that some of it was unforeseen. And so we definitely aren't going to just throw her out. Right. But she also needs to know you're going to pay a monthly payment for this third car that you're driving in. And that, you know, you're working toward it being yours.
Yeah. Guys, a part of this is important because one thing that everybody craves is freedom. Okay. I mean, everyone will tell you, freedom. That in the United States, always, you know, that was one of our key words. We are a free country. And the Christian faith is the only faith out there that is based on freedom. The freedom to choose, freedom of choice. Okay. And we oftentimes get that mixed up, and our kids get that mixed up with freedom to do whatever I want. And that's not what the Christian faith is about. It's the freedom to make a choice and then own the responsibility or the outcome of that. And so something that is really important, and this is also starting at a very young age, is that when you start to put expectations out, like we have said, hey, we are going to pay for half of your car, okay? And so at that point, when they know that, all right, they have some freedom on how much money they're going to put in their account. Okay. And so one of them is going to be driving a Matchbox car, you know, I mean, and that's the way this looks like it's shaping up. Again, that's not what we're wishing at all. We had one that put
our
us
second
on our
oldest.
heels like, oh, we're not going to have enough money to cover what
We
this
thought we were
kid's
going to have to take a
packing
loan
away.
out to match his car fund.
But again, that's the freedom and then the responsibility or the consequences that will come, because this is the gift you're giving them to know, oh, crud.
Yeah.
Cause and effect for the freedom.
Yeah. They don't get one without the other. They can't have all the freedoms without the responsibilities. Hun, I want to put a disclaimer here, because we do have a lot of folks out there who have a failure to launch, and their kid is sitting in the basement eating chips and salsa, playing video games with no job and no motivation. And so we know that that's possible, and it could be a combination of maybe parents enabling the child or child's motivation, or maybe some mental health issues. And so we're not naive to think there isn't anxiety and depression, and our kids sometimes can't get out of bed or don't want to work. And so, and it's hard because they're an adult now. Sometimes they're bigger than you. How do you get them to get out of your house or to get a job? And so we know that. So please get some outside help if you find yourself with that situation. And maybe you are parenting out of fear and anxiety, and you're not really encouraging them to launch, or maybe the child has no motivation, or this immaturity or this anxiety about launching. And so those delays could be for a variety of reasons. And we know, so this isn't always going to be a cookie cutter answer for how do we help our kids launch.
Yeah, I like the disclaimer. I also want to add, this is aside from anything with physical or mental handicaps. Like the rules slightly change with those things. And I say slightly because it still doesn't take away their part, whatever their part could be. Okay. So there's still a part. So we have somebody who has a handicap of sort, that doesn't mean nothing for them. It means, okay, so we're going to have to adapt and make some changes. I think, remember John Roseman, honey, used to make a comment, and he's like, if you're feeling the pain more than your child is, you are the one with the problem. And so the idea here that you're fretting because your child is down eating Cheetos in the basement, and it's a pigsty down there, and you're doing his laundry, and you're getting frustrated, and they're down there yelling where their next drink is, then you have set up a very nasty problem. And so the way you do that is you rinse your hands from all that and say, listen, the TV is off, the electric's off, there's no more food, all these things.
No more Cheetos.
So that they start to experience the pain that you were experiencing, okay? Pain is a motivator as well as rewards are motivators, and we don't take either of those. At Rock Solid Families, we don't lean to one side or the other. We use both. That's how God does it with us. We get blessed, but we get consequences, and because that's how biologically and spiritually we have been made.
Yeah. So number 1 was start early. Number 2 was clearly communicate boundaries. Number 3 was explain the changes way ahead of time. And here's what happens in number 4. And we are experiencing that with several of our adult children. And that is enjoy that time. Be intentional about friendship, adult friendship with your kids. Stop being their parent. Stop giving them advice. They really don't want to hear it. Celebrate holidays and get-togethers where you can just really enjoy that time together. If you're giving advice, unsolicited advice, what do you call them? Usager.
Unsolicited advice giver.
Yeah. And so, don't give advice unless they ask for it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because now you're actually really enjoying the person that they are, not the child that they are. And now you're celebrating their successes with them. Hey, they just got a new job, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of what you're doing, And the fact that you express that proudness in you over them is like jet fuel for them. Because, those are those positive affirmations that even us as adults like to have. Okay.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, you're a good little boy, that's a nice job you have. No, that's we don't need to belittle them. It's like, wow, you are doing fantastic.
And when we can't shame them if they're not living up to quote unquote, our expectations. If you wanted them to be a pre-med student and they decided to go, work at Walmart, you cannot go, well, I was really hoping you'd become a medical student. Like, you cannot shame them into their decisions. Their decisions are their decisions, and you're going to encourage and support them. But you're also going to hold them accountable to if they can't make their bills, or if they quit school and have $100,000 of college debt because they wanted to go drive a truck. Like, you're still going to make them responsible for paying their college debt, right? It was their decision to leave college. And so we got to make sure that we support their decisions and hold them accountable and responsible for them.
Yeah, we had one of our kiddos made a choice to not pursue what you and I grew up with and what we wanted. And at the end of the day, we just had to say, hey, he's totally independent financially.
Yep.
He's doing his thing, and he's not complaining, and so we're not complaining about him. I mean, that's how we can both then enjoy each other in common company when we get together. It's like, hey, as long as you're covered, we're covered.
And
Let's
again,
go out
we're not
and have a meal.
standing around judging and condemning him because he's not going to come around our home, but he's comes around our holidays and our get-togethers, and we can enjoy each other's company. And that's number 4. So number 5 is what you were talking about, is being encouraging and supportive to our adult children, that you are their biggest cheerleader, okay? Again, you're not going to be their enabler. You're not going to catch them on their bad decisions. You're going to cheer them on and support and encourage them, all right? And show them, like you said, that you're proud.
Yeah. And, that encouragement is just something that you want to continue to do to them and for them, because they will learn and practice that for their own kids.
Yeah.
When they see that they like hanging around old grandma and grandpa, hanging out there, the idea that someday they're going to get that opportunity to do that with their kids, and they're going to see even more and more the importance of, I love when we watch our sons having fun and encouraging, but disciplining, right? Their own little kiddos.
Yeah.
Because they're just at the very beginning of starting to form this deeper relationship. But they're doing it, our oldest grandkid now is 7 and the youngest is just at 1. And you're seeing these processes already taking place.
Yeah. Please, as Merrill mentioned before, don't let your pain be greater than their pain. And also don't get caught up in your adult child's drama or their bad decisions. Don't save them from the consequences of their actions. If they go out and buy this really, really, really expensive car they can't afford, and you try to, they didn't ask your advice, they're adults, they paid for it on their own, then let them figure that out.
Yeah.
It may get repoed. They may have to sell it upside down, and you're not going to go, I told you so. Don't shame them. But don't get caught up in saving them either, right?
Yeah, because then they start working out of spitefulness and they share less with you. And so it's, they made a purchase that all of our boys have done it. And I know we did that. I know I may have made a purchase or two that in particular your parents were not too fond of. And it's like at the end of the day, and I always said, and we say with our kids, it is mine to take care of. Yeah. And so if I made a purchase that doesn't work well, I have to figure it out. Okay.
But if you save them, they're going to keep making bad decisions because they think mommy and daddy will bail them out. Right? You can't do that, or you're going to get frustrated. And we've had that ton come in our office of parents resentful and bitter because they're kind of saving their child over and over and over again. Well, your child knows that. That's why they're not launching well.
Yeah. And number 6. Yeah. And number 6 is that whole idea. I mean, we're talking about a lot of the logistics of getting your kid ready. And these are the nuts and the bolts, right? But one thing that we have not talked about to this point, but is at the underpinning of everything that we do, is constantly in your home right now, no matter the age, your kids knowing where the ultimate source of energy and strength and comfort coming through God, coming through the idea of knowing who Jesus Christ is, and not doing it just out of the textbook, this is what church says I should do, but the idea of actually authentically teaching your kids what it looks like to pray, what it looks like in good times to rejoice, but in bad times to know, I know where I can go for help. Because here's one thing that you're getting ready to leave your kids with. A crazy life, a crazy world, whether you like it or not, right? You're not going to be able to put them in a plastic bubble to protect that. And that means that you're leaving those kids to go walk out into dangerous places that are not going to, they're not always going to come with good answers. Like, why did this tragedy happen? Why did I lose my job? Why is my marriage not working out the way I wanted it to? These things are very likely to happen in all of our kids' lives as well as our own. And so giving them the gift, it doesn't mean even when you're giving them, they may reject it, right?
Yeah.
You may see that teenager say, I don't know if I believe any of this Jesus stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Like, they have to go through that process, but ultimately knowing that when all else is gone crazy and the waves are too big to swim through, that they have to have an anchor. And so teaching them why you anchored to Jesus Christ.
And you have to model it. You can't just tell them and then live a different life. You can't be dependent on your mommy and daddy and have them rescue you, and then your child thinks that they should be independent. You are going to have to model it, not by just your words, but your actions and your attitudes. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And yes, they may wonder, they may question, they may even reject for a season, but those seeds that you plant when they are in season 1, 2, and 3 will bear fruit, whether it be in that child's life or somebody that it's rippled out to. So please, please point their eyes to Jesus, because there is no greater gift. We have said that on this show over and over again. There's no greater gift you can give a child. It's bigger than, a house or a car or a college education, but you give them a relationship with Jesus Christ, and you give them something that will sustain them and strengthen them and guide them their whole entire life.
All right. So we are going to wrap things up with our challenge. And so, hopefully as you've walked through some of this, maybe we have hit a little nugget that is of interest to you or something that you're experiencing. And so, part of our deal always is to be on the proactive side of things. The earlier that we can get ahead of things or understand things, the better prepared we can be when those challenges come along. And so there are these 5 success markers that you can look for in your relationship.
Yeah.
Okay?
So one is just having a trusting friendship with your adult child, that it's fun and respectful mutually. That's a huge sign of great success.
Yeah. And if they're not in that adult phase yet, okay, we're not saying here, right now I have a great friendship with my 8-year-old. That's not what we're saying.
No, you're not in that season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 2, your adult child is responsible and self-sufficient. They can care for him or herself. Okay. That idea that you can now look at your 24-year-old and you go, wow, they're kind of doing all this stuff on their own.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and taking care of the consequences of their actions. Number 3 is that your adult child actually asks you for your opinion once in a while. It's not like they want to cut you off completely. If you have done this launching well, then they've seen something in you they want to model or even learn from more. And so when your adult child does call, and your boys do this all the time, and they'll call and say, hey, Dad, what do you think? I want to run something by you. And man, that's when you can speak into their life. Otherwise, you wait until asked.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, because my desire is to want to tell them all the time what they should do. And I should tell you that, like, the desire to do that doesn't easily go away, okay? Because that's my own security of trying to bring my self-righteousness out, all my smarts and my wisdom. And again, that's of me, and they don't need to carry that. So being aware of that, okay?
Number 4, your adult child has seen a healthy, Christ-like priority where God is first in your life, then your spouse, then your children. And when you model that, then they start to live that. And we've seen that in some of our children. And that is such a reward for us to see that priority in their life.
Yeah. And number 5 is that your child has seen and understands not just the relationship hierarchy and balance, but the work-life balance. How they're going to actually spend time with their family, with their work, with God, that they work that balance out so that they can have that constant in their family.
Yeah.
So
it's a blessing. It is such a reward to see our kids launch and be those successful adults that we were designed to help them be created to be. And that was a very weird way to say it, that God had designed them to be, and that God wants us to help them to be.
I want to say something here, because now you may have listened to what we've said and you go, okay, well, I thought I was doing this. I thought I was doing that. At the end of the day, this is part of the challenge we all have. These kiddos have free will.
Yeah.
Okay. These kiddos turning into adults have free will. And so you could have dotted every I and crossed every T and thought you did everything right, not rigidly or whatever, just in love and being very graceful. And they choose a different path, and they choose maybe a harmful path. You know, beating yourself up is of no value to anyone. All right. At the end of the day, that's part of them being an adult, of them having to own their own way and their own choices. And so you are going to have kids. We have kids. You guys are going to have kids that find themselves into a pickle or not a very good place, and they're not particularly happy, and you're not really happy about it. Okay. And so at that point, you know, these things happen. All right. And again, you want to be there, but you want to be there with boundaries and just with guidance when it's asked for, but don't spend a lot of time beating yourself up on a lot of this.
Yeah, and we've had to learn this the hard way. You have to approach those kind of situations with humility, that there's something in here that God wants to teach you as well. And so we continue to learn and grow. We don't have all the answers. That's another disclaimer, is that we're a work in progress too, and that we want to love our kids. We want to equip our kids and empower them to be all that God has created them to be. So we're on this journey with you. And if there's any way that we can help you, please reach out to Rock Solid Families. You can reach us at rocksolidfamilies.org, or you can call our office in St. Leon, Indiana at 812-576-7625.
All right. A huge thank you to Maxwell Construction and Casey's Outdoor Solutions for again sponsoring the the Rock Solid Families podcast. And by the way, if you haven't, you should check out the Strong Dads podcast with Kyle Crawford and Merrill Hutchinson.
There you go. A little plug there.
Yeah, a little plug. All right. So anything we can do to help you, please reach out to us.
Thank you so much for listening to the Rock Solid Families podcast, helping to build a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200.